Okay, so here we are, students. We're studying our course, Christian Leadership, today. We're on our lesson number 1, and we're going to be going over the overview for this course so that you can understand it as you study independently through your study guides. The subtopic of this lesson is People, Tasks, and Goals. We're studying Christian Leadership. Now, this is the 6th course in Unit 2 of our bachelor's degree program. And this course presents the biblical foundations of leadership. It introduces you to the theory and practice of leadership and guides you in the application of both biblical and theoretical principles. Now, you will find that this material is appropriate for both beginning and as well as experienced leaders. You will also find it is helpful for those who wish to train others in Christian leadership. And the main emphasis is upon the development of gifts and capacities and interpersonal relationships among leaders and followers. So this is what we should get out of this lesson as we study through it. There's some things that you should know as you begin this course. You want to be able to have a Bible. You want to be able to have your study guide. And there are also various teaching aids that we have available to you for this lesson. We have a few visual aids as well as exercise sheets that you can request from our Office of Student Services, and we can get them to you by email. So just feel free to contact us by email, and we'll get a copy of any visual aids and or exercise sheets that you would desire to have to enhance your learning experience. So we're always blessed and privileged to have you as a part of the GBCS family. What I'm going to do today is go over the overview of lesson number 1 to help you as you begin the study for lesson 1. And that way, as you go through, you'll get a little more depth to your independent study. So here we are with our first session, and we want to orientate each of you to the course materials and to the study guide. If this is your first time studying independently, it's helpful for you to be acquainted with the study guide, for it's basically your instructor. It is going to instruct you in which sections of the lesson that you need to emphasize. It's going to ask you some self-test questions, and it's going to have an answer key for you to check your answers to make sure that you have grasped the material correctly. Also, at the end of each unit, you'll be instructed when to submit your unit exam. That's when you would log in to the Online Student Center using your username and password. Same place where you downloaded your course materials, you'll see your exams listed. If you log in and you find your exams are not listed, contact the Office of Student Services so that we can upload your exams so that you can complete them. You will get lifetime results as well. And your final grade is comprised of this bachelor's course, comprised of the average score of your 3 unit exams. There are 3 exams for each of your bachelor's courses. And like I said, this is course number 6. So if you're at this stage, you've already experienced courses 1 through 5. And so you should be very familiar with that process. Now, the first lesson in our study guide talks about people who lead and follow. It helped us to describe God's plan for leadership. It helped us to describe the roles and characteristics of leaders and the significance of those following them. Now, for personal preparation, as you begin to study this lesson, it would be helpful to recall some of the great Bible leaders like Moses and Joshua and David, and ask yourself, what made them effective? And as you examine that question, I want you to pray for understanding of the principles of leadership that we will discuss in this lesson. I want you to spend time daily in your personal devotions of Bible reading and prayer. So this is very important because we need for God to reveal these things to us. Even if you're studying in the classroom setting, the revelation is not directly coming from your instructor. It is indirectly coming from your instructor. The direct source of the information and wisdom and knowledge that we need comes from God himself through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. It's always key to keep that in mind. Now, if you looked at the beginning of this lesson, you're going to see a story about a man named Pedro on pages 14 and 15 in your study guide. And the question that we ask from that section is, to whom do you relate more? Do you relate more to Pedro or his brothers? For we see Pedro was announced to be the leader of the youth ministry. We see how he responded to it, and we see how he has spoke about how he would lead his brothers. So I want you to take a look at who do you relate to more, Pedro or his brothers? And I want you to write down why. A second part of our introduction is, what leadership characteristics do you think Pedro demonstrates in the story that's given in our study guide? I want you to go ahead and write your answers on the writing surface and leave them there throughout the lesson. And I want you to refer to those often as they are discussed through the course of your lesson. Now, our first objective of this course is under the heading of Leadership in God's Plan. You'll find on page 17 and 20 of your study guide, where leadership is defined. So our first objective is to explain what is meant by the expression, the plan of God. And the question that we should think about in this section is, what is the plan of God? And as you study this lesson, hopefully you'll be able to answer something close to the fact that the plan of God is a specific way of accomplishing his purpose of reconciling men, women, and children to himself. Again, what is God's plan? It is God's specific way of accomplishing his purpose of reconciling men to himself. Another question we want to think about is, what is an important part of God's plan? And the answer should be related to this. It is to accomplish his purpose through people who are guided and empowered by the Holy Spirit. And let's look at a second question that we want to think about under this first objective. Why is Christian leadership important? Hopefully, as you went through your study guide or as you go through this lesson, you understand that Christian leadership is important because God has specific purposes and plans. And leaders are needed to carry out those purposes and plans. So to illustrate this point, we think about a personal story in your life, such as a group of new converts meeting in house fellowship or the planning of a new church. There are specific purposes for gathering, and there are specific plans that need to take place in order for that to happen. So in order for God to fulfill his purpose of reconciling men to himself, he needs people to work through who are guided and empowered by the Holy Spirit.